Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to explain the harmonic series. You know, what is it? Why do we need it? All that kind of stuff. So here's definitions for you. The harmonic series is also known as the overtone series. So just in case you know it as the overtone series, it's the same thing as the harmonic series. So we'll mop that up straight away. Okay, here comes a sort of scientific definition. It's a sequence of harmonics related to a fundamental frequency. Well, if you're a physicist, that all makes perfect sense. If you're a humble musician, you might just be thinking, what? Sorry? And what does that actually mean? Well, the best way of thinking about this is just to be entirely practical for a moment. If you had at your disposal a length of garden hose, for example, and you were able to put a mouthpiece in it, a brass instrument mouthpiece, a trumpet mouthpiece, trombone mouthpiece, something like that, you would be able to relax your lips and blow into your piece of garden hose, and it would give you this thing we call the fundamental frequency. In other words, there'd be a kind of lowish note that you would hear when you blew into that mouthpiece. Now, what would happen if you start to tighten your lips and then blow again? You'll suddenly think, oh, the note's gone higher. This is entirely the principle of how brass instruments work. So it's the easiest way of thinking about this is related to brass instruments. Because if you play the trumpet, for example, and you don't use any of the valves on it, and you really kind of relax your lips and blow, you'll have a fundamental note. As you tighten up your lips, you'll get a higher note. Tighten again, you get a higher note. Tighten again, you get a higher note. And every time you get a higher note, these notes get closer to each other. So that happens as we go up. And this is the way a brass instrument works. So if you don't use any valves at all, you get this series of notes from the fundamental frequency called the harmonic series. But of course, it doesn't give you all the notes you need. So if you then press down the first valve, for example, it takes that harmonic series and takes it all down a tone or a whole step. And then you get exactly the same harmonic series, but everything's a tone or a step lower than it was before. If you just use the second valve, actually you get what you had before, but just down a semitone or a half step. So you see what's happening with the combination of the valves. All you're doing is taking the harmonic series and transposing it. So when a brass player is working with valves, then all they're doing is actually using the harmonic series, but transposing it by using the valves so that you can end up playing every single chromatic note of the scale. If you play a trombone, well, you're using the slide to do the same thing. In other words, those valves or that slide is introducing an extra bit of tubing, an extra length of tubing, or reducing the length of the tubing so we can transpose the harmonic series. So this is a principle that could be explained in physics quite happily, but you can immediately see that this has a very practical implication, and it's particularly obvious for brass players. Okay, so if you play a brass instrument, you'll kind of probably know this, but it might be worth just experimenting, thinking, oh, can I check this out? Does it really happen that it all just goes down a half step or a semitone when I press the second valve? Oh, yeah, it does. And that will just help you to understand what's going on. If you know a brass player, you could get them to show you how this works. Well, what does it actually mean in terms of notes? Well, you can see what I've put here. If this very low note, this bottom C, were to be the fundamental note, what I'm saying is that the first note you have when you tighten your lips in a brass mouthpiece is an octave higher. Then it goes up a fifth, then it goes up a fourth, then it goes up a third. This is a major third. Then it goes up a minor third. So you see what I mean? These intervals are getting closer together the higher you go. Back in Baroque times, for example, when the brass players didn't have valves, they just had a length of tubing, they could only play the notes of the harmonic series. And the only way you could change key would be to pull off one piece of tubing and stick another piece of tubing in that was longer or shorter. And back then they called these different bits of tubing crooks. And eventually somebody came up with the idea of actually, how do we build the crooks into the instrument? And that's where the valves came in that just enable you to get around this. But back then it was a bit of a pain really, because it's all very well if you can play this note and play this note, but what if you wanted one of the notes in between? Well, then you'd have to pull off one bit of tubing, stick another bit of tubing in. So then the composer's got to write a part of rest, so you've got time to change the plumbing in your instrument. Not terribly convenient. And if the player got the wrong length of plumbing on the instrument, then the next time they played it would all be in the wrong key. So fraught with difficulty. And you'll notice that some of those Baroque trumpet pieces, like Bach's Brandenburg Concerto, where the trumpet appears, the trumpet part's actually very high, because you can see as you go higher in the harmonic series, then the notes are closer together. So if you want to be able to play neighbouring notes, you've got to be high in the harmonic series if you haven't got valves. So it was a great relief when the valves came along. So let's just see how the harmonic series works out. That there are many more possibilities beyond the notes that I've written here, but I've written the first 16 notes, which is kind of enough to be going on with. So here's note number 1, that's this one, which is all the way down there. Then note number 2, as I say, is an octave higher, so that's C. Then we go up a 5th to G for number 3. Number 4 is a 4th higher at C. Then I'm going up a major 3rd for number 5 to E. Going up a minor 3rd for number 6 to G, going up another minor 3rd for number 7, B flat, and then going up just a tone or a step to go for my C. You see how these notes are getting closer together. Then from this C we go up a note to D, then up a note for number 10, E. All of those have been tones or whole steps so far. Now you notice I've got a semitone in there. Interestingly, there's another tone there, but then I go back to semitones or half step there. There's another tone, here's another half step or a semitone, another semitone. So do you see how it all gets closer together as we go? And this is one of the real skills of the brass player, that a brass player knows exactly where to position that lip tension to get note number 5 in the harmonic series. That's a bit of an ask, isn't it? And it's why many people who start out on brass instruments can often play the wrong notes, because they've got the right valves, but they're the wrong place. They're at the wrong place in the harmonic series. But that's how it works. Now, this has implications for other people as well. Even if you play the piano, for example, you can play that first note, and the resonance of the piano, particularly if you've got the sustaining pedal on, is kind of playing into these resultant notes. So some of all these notes is also kind of sounding when you play that fundamental note. So those fundamental notes kind of resonate. It's true for all other instruments as well. So it has a kind of impact on the ultimate sound. They're very subtly there. When you listen to somebody play that note, you don't automatically hear all these other notes, but they're nevertheless related to each other because they belong to the same harmonic series, and it's part of what creates the overall tone, the sound of the instrument. So hopefully that's the harmonic series kind of debunked, because lots of people say, I don't know what this harmonic series thing is, and some physicist once explained it to me and I'm completely lost. For a musician, this is what it means, and those are the first 16 notes of a harmonic series that starts on C. You could transpose this down a semitone or a half step, or up a semitone or a half step, or up a tone, or whatever interval you want, and you could reconstruct that harmonic series starting on any note simply by transposing the notes. So I hope that brings a little bit of musical clarity to the harmonic series. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you to take a tour of the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Lots of things on there, courses, our Maestro's program, lots of other things. There's also a page on a little link on the first homepage that would take you to merch. So if you're wanting to buy a musical mug that explains useful things to you, like the circular fifths or chords that are useful, or you want to buy a bag to put your music in, or you want to buy a nice hoodie or something, some beautiful kind of t-shirts and things, all on there. So you might want to buy yourself a gift, you might want to buy a gift for a music teacher or the conductor of your choir or band for Christmas or something. Well, there we are, musical friends. You could buy a gift there if you wanted to. So that's simply, you click on merch and that will take you to that place and you'll be able to see all the options available to you. But have a good look round the whole website because there are courses, all sorts of other resources for you that you might well find useful.